done through legislation. And so what they basically do is they just decide which crimes that are on the books they don't think should be crimes, and then they just don't do anything about it. And so you've seen it. You saw it in San Francisco with the prosecutor they even had to recall. You've seen it in Los Angeles. You've seen it in Baltimore, Philadelphia, all these places. And it's a concerted effort to basically put people back on the street who are committing criminal offenses. And the successful policing and law and order policies that have happened, particularly in urban areas in other parts of the country, take the smaller offenses seriously. And when you give license to violate laws, even if they're more modest offenses, you then create a permission structure where people are going to commit even more crimes. And so you have these crazy situations where you can just break into somebody's car or break into their home, and no, that's not something that they think should be prosecuted. Well, that creates a culture, and it creates a situation where really the criminal element has the advantage over the law-abiding citizen. Now, we've done the opposite here in Florida. We've had examples of those types of prosecutors in Florida, and I think I'm the only governor in America that's actually removed them from their posts and insisted that we have a faithful execution of the law. We obviously still monitor these prosecutors as new elections come in, and as there is examples of them not following, then we obviously will be willing to act on that. But if you look back, why would you want to be a police officer? Why would you want to be involved in law enforcement if the prosecutor is just going to turn the bad guys back on the street? Then you got to arrest them again. So we've rejected that in Florida. We've obviously stood very strongly with having strong of enforcing the law, because we understand that's what you need to do. And the other thing is who would want to be wearing the uniform if the statutes and the policies benefit the criminal element over law-abiding citizens? And yet we've seen that around the country, where they'll do things like no cash bail. So, you apprehend somebody that's a threat to the public, they bring them in, arrest them, go in front of a judge, and then they go back on the street. And then what, like 2 weeks later, you got to arrest again when the person commits an additional offense? That's very demoralizing in terms of wearing a uniform and putting yourself at risk. And so we've rejected it. I mean, we obviously weren't going to do it at the state level. I know there was some rumblings about it. Maybe early in my tenure, there was also rumblings about reducing sentences and letting people out early. And I think we put the kibosh on that pretty definitively, that I haven't really brought that back in more recent years, because I think they know it's not going to do. But, I remember Miami-Dade, the circuit down there, the judge was trying to do no cash bail. And so, we let it be known that wasn't going to fly in Florida. And we eventually were able to avoid seeing that happen. But what bugs me is you can have a difference of opinion. You could have different views. But when policies have been tried and uniformly failed, why would you want to replicate that at this point? Those policies aren't going to work, so there's no reason to be indulging in those policies. Another thing you see is, part of it is with illegal immigration, but you'll see these theft rings, and they go and these groups steal a lot of stuff, and from personal residences, but also from commercial enterprises. And they actually had a group in New York. They were stealing in New York, all this stuff in New York City especially. But then once they would sell the stuff and make their money, they would travel to Florida and spend it here. And so someone from CNN asked one of the criminals, why don't you just stay in Florida and steal there? And he said, because they put you in jail in Florida when you steal. And so, it shows the culture difference. But we did a huge bunch of reforms on beefing up support against retail theft. And so you go to some of these places in California or near, it's like toothpaste is it's Fort Knox, at these stores. Everything's in plexiglass, all this stuff, lock it, because people they're allowed to steal. And so you basically have to do that. I guess the businesses have to defend themselves. Now, a lot of them have ended up going out of business or shutting down operations in some of those areas, but you do that. we believe the opposite. I mean, going in and just looting a store, you're going to be held accountable. And you need to be held accountable, and that's part of the reason why our crime rate has pretty consistently been at 50-year lows in the last couple years. And it's you got to have good policies. I mean, you guys can do the best job in the world, but if you have jailbreak policies or policies that's empowering the criminal element, you're going to be behind the eight ball. It's going to be very hard, to be effective. So that's something that. And yes, I'm proud of what we've done to support people coming into the profession, people transferring from other states and jurisdictions in the profession, scholarships to go to police academy, all those things I think are very, very important. And we've been very, very strong advocates, for all of that. And I think we brought in a lot of good people, and the work is great. But if you don't have good policies, it's really, really difficult. Now, on the flip side, we could have the best policies. We could have, good prosecutors. If you don't have people that are willing to do the job and sacrifice and work hard, it's not going to work either. And I think, I don't think there's a state that does better than us, with rank and file folks, not just in the sheriff's departments, but in our police departments. You've got a lot of really good public servants. They obviously work hard. They take pride in their work. They get plaudits from the public. I mean, our public generally appreciates what people do. So that's been a huge, huge factor in it as well. And then more recently, you see things going on in the news. I understand that there's need to be cooperation when you're dealing with some of these major issues. And so at the beginning of last year, I called a special session of the Florida legislature so that we would be on the same page across jurisdictions with respect to the immigration interior enforcement. We obviously had 4 years, and we worked with many of you to deal with the spillover from what was happening by the former President Biden opening the border and having 7 to 10 million people enter our country illegally from all over the world, no vetting, all this stuff. So it obviously created huge problems. The election in 24 was in large measure a referendum on that policy, and then with promises to shut it down and to reverse it. And so I knew when President Trump was taking office, you had to be on the same page. Now, we banned sanctuary cities my first year as governor. We did other things, to beef up the fight, removing incentives, like not allowing driver's licenses, all this stuff. And then that's important. But in terms of enforcement, you had to work together, and so we called for reforms, and we had to fight, fight over it. But we eventually got what was necessary. And there's a number of things that we did, but the most important thing that we did was just impose a very clear duty on all state and local law enforcement agencies that you have a responsibility to cooperate, the best of your ability with Department of Homeland Security on interior enforcement. So Highway Patrol. You have a guide trooper pull someone over. They're here. They're driving drunk. They have no driver's license. They're not here legally. That's an easy thing to then make sure that DHS is able to do that. You have people that are convicted of criminal offenses who are here illegally. They come out of that prison. The only appropriate place at that point is DHS taking them out of this country, and you turn them over and do that. And so we've worked like that, and I think it's been very, very effective. We've done between state and local, and, we're partnering with DHS on a lot of this. We've done about 20,000 apprehensions of people, of illegal aliens, just since probably last spring. And that's in addition to what DHS is doing on its own. And so that's the way you show cooperation. That's the way that you actually get the job done for the people that you represent. Now, what they're doing in these other states is basically it's a form of interposition. They are sanctuary jurisdictions openly, proudly, where they say, we are not going to cooperate with any type of immigration enforcement. And so what does that mean? Okay, like Minnesota, you have somebody in a jail or in prison and they're getting out. Why would you not honor a detainer request from the Department of Homeland Security to turn over the illegal criminal alien over to immigration so that they can be repatriated, but they don't do that. They don't help with data. They don't help with all these other things. And so it's almost like, you have an election, you debate these issues, the laws are on the books, and they just believe that they should be able to opt out of that and not be involved. And in fact, now it's being more than that. It's thwarting that. And you have really aggressive operations that are being done, funded in some of these cities to try to prevent the law enforcement from carrying out basically what the voters asked to do in the 2024 election and what federal law requires of them to do. And so that's created an environment where, if you work for the Department of Homeland Security, if you're an immigration officer, they're putting a target on your back. They're trying to put your likeness out. They want people to be able to come and target you. So they're creating this situation where just doing your job and just following law is very, very difficult because you have all this clutter and you have all this sand that's trying to be thrown in the gears. That is not appropriate for a state governor to be inciting, a mayor to be inciting. If you don't like the fact that we have immigration laws, then you should have done a better job when you were in power to try to convince the public that what you wanted to do is right. But what I see from some of those jurisdictions is basically a belief that there should be no real enforcement of immigration law, which means you have one president open the border. There's no way to unring that bell. You can violate the law. You can violate your oath of office. You can not take care that the laws are faithfully executed for 4 years. And then the American people can demand redress from that in an election. And then you're telling me that somehow that doesn't happen. So I think it's the lack of cooperation, that's causing a lot of friction. I think it's the fact that these politicians are intentionally trying to sabotage enforcement efforts, not even doing basic cooperation, which I think if you ask just, someone, hey, do you think if someone comes to the country illegally, commits a crime, that, after they've been punished, that they should be turned over to immigration, or should they just be released on the street? I think most people would say they should be turned over and then sent back to their home country, but that's not what they're doing there. So we have shown the way on, retail theft. We've shown the way on handling rogue prosecutors. We've shown the way on having strong laws that make sure people do the time if they did the crime. But we've also shown, how you can work with state, local, and federal, all pulling in the same direction and all getting the job done. And so what we were able to do in the first, it really isn't even a year, because by the time we got our special session done was sometime in February, I think, of last year. Obviously, DHS had to stand up stuff. So we really didn't, we did our 287G agreements at the state level. I know a lot of the sheriffs did it shortly thereafter. But, it wasn't even like we've been doing this for a full year. I mean, we probably started sometime in the spring in earnest, and you've basically had a clinic about how you can work together to be able to protect the public and to make sure that folks, particularly folks that are in our justice system, that they are turned over to the appropriate authorities and removed from our communities when they don't have a right to be here. That's not what you're seeing in some of these other areas. And so I don't think it's, a mystery why some of those areas have struggled in recent years. Some of these areas are the same areas where you had massive rioting and looting, 4 or 5 years ago. Why you couldn't keep order in the streets during that period of time. It's kind of the same mindset about, certain laws they think are fine, others they don't, and this is what you end up with. So I'm glad Florida has been on the same page, our local, and look, I get it. Not every local jurisdiction in this state wants to be cooperating. Most do, but not everyone. You can look at a map of Florida, look at like election results. You look red with blue dots, right? Well, where are you going to find people that may not want to do it? Probably where those blue dots are. I get that. But we ultimately had to make a determination through the legislature and with me as governor, what's the policy of the state going to be? and you do have a responsibility to be doing best efforts on that. And I understand some haven't liked it, but all are expected to do it. Many have been very, very aggressive in terms of what they've been doing, and I think that that's really, really positive. But I'll tell you this, your constituents really do appreciate it because, they watched for 4 years the nonsense. And, you'd have these congressmen would go on TV, I'm going to do a press release, I'm going to, do all this, and nothing ever happens, right? And so now they're in a situation, you had a new administration come in, and they want to see action. And I can tell you this, the action, the results that have been achieved in Florida, I bet you would have a fraction of that, had we not had our sheriffs and police departments and state agencies rowing in the same direction. If it was just like, hey, just kind of let the feds handle it, we're not going to be involved in it. Even if you're not sabotaging, even if you're just saying, look, we just don't want to be involved, the reality is we would not have had nearly the success that we've had. So this has been a really vital component to this. I know people appreciate, when they see progress. We're going to continue to stand up for what's right and do what's right and do it in the right way. I mean, the sheriffs here, you guys have very high standards of professionalism that you insist upon, for your deputies. I know that's same with police departments, and certainly the same with our state agencies. And that's the way it ought to be. You've got a lot of responsibility. You wield power. And with that, obviously requires, that you live up to the highest standards. And I've seen that time and time again, throughout the state of Florida. So I just want to say thanks for all the hard work on all the different things. We've got the other irons in the fire. We got the legislature in, we're working on some stuff. I think we're going to probably advance the ball forward on some crime issues in a way that I think people in this room and well as me will be happy with. I've not really seen much in the way of what I call jailbreak legislation. I've had to veto a number of things over the years, and some of it wasn't as major, but, I just believe that we got to keep going in the same direction. Haven't really seen that yet this session, but who knows? They can pop stuff out at any time, and you never know what's going to happen. But suffice it to say, we'll be holding the line. We'll be continuing the momentum, and, there's no other state I would rather be a citizen in. Just as a father of 3 young kids, my wife and I, than the free. And that has nothing to do with being governor. That could be, doing anything. This is where I think people feel that they have the best opportunity to succeed for themselves and their family. And the public safety and the commitment to public safety is a huge, huge reason why. So from me to you, thank you. And we got more work to do. So God bless everybody. Thanks so much.